Along with the rise of remote work comes a parallel question about the synchronicity of work. Work performed in an office environment, even when done in isolation, is still by default synchronous. That is, the parties performing the work are in proximity to one another. The majority of their days coincide with one another, and the assumption is that communication is or has the potential to be continual. This is seen often as a natural state and positive because it allows for a natural back and forth flow between various parties who are all working toward a common goal, each in their own way. Coordinating the time, the physical space, and the communication allows for a relatively seamless work environment. When we bring remote work into the equation, this changes because there's no longer necessarily an assumption of synchronous work. It's harder to guarantee that people will be available for one another at any given time. The actual communication process may be more difficult, and the cohesiveness of a team has the possibility to be disrupted. Often this is viewed as a downside of remote work and is viewed as a question of the benefit of the trade-off of adopting remote work. In other words, if we save time, money, effort, space by allowing people to work remotely, is this worthwhile for the loss of communication and efficiency that we would otherwise have in an office? In many cases, this is the default assumption of how the question should be framed. And it is a legitimate question, and in many workplaces may remain a legitimate question for some time. But it's also necessary to dig a little bit deeper and ask if the perceived benefits of the default state are as beneficial as initially assumed. Synchronous work is by nature collaborative. Even if the majority of a person's daily work is done by themselves, the ability and even necessity of sharing information back and forth with other members present means that performing the work will center around discussion, combined effort, and real-time information sharing. If a project manager, an analyst, and a technical writer are all collaborating on a paper, in an office space, it's likely that they'll have a meeting to touch base, separate to work on their respective sections, communicate throughout the day to incorporate information from one another, and then meet back up again to finalize the paper. Depending on the exact work being performed, it's likely that for a particular task, there's a fair amount of downtime during which other tasks or goals are being attended to. And so what effectively comes out of this is asynchronous work within the frame of synchronous work. Your main goal for the day may be to collaborate on something, but the actual amount of time spent on that task may be less than the time spent on your own smaller, separate tasks. This will vary significantly from workplace to workplace, from field to field, and obviously some businesses require more active collaboration. To take an extreme example, you wouldn't expect a team of surgeons performing a surgery to work asynchronously. However, there are many situations, probably more than we think about on a day-to-day basis, where the default state of synchronous collaborative work is not only unnecessary, but may be destructive, inefficient. We've touched on this before, the idea that some organizations and some individuals work better collaboratively while others work better asynchronously, but almost anyone and almost any organization is likely to benefit from re-examining the balance between these two aspects of work and seeing where they can apply each to best benefit the workday. There's been a significant rise in collaborative tools, Microsoft Teams, Trello, Slack, Skype, Zoom, Google Hangouts, and many more that allow workers to share information and collaborate, especially in the context of a distributed environment, whether fully remote or partially remote. The majority of these tools are flexible enough that they can be used by practically any organization to support whatever means of work best suits that organization. For example, a chat mechanism like Slack can allow multiple workers in the same physical location to quickly throw ideas around for everyone to see without having to call a meeting, and then those workers can operate under the assumption that everyone has seen it within a short time frame, because everyone who needs to see the information is sitting in that same location with Slack open. Contrary-wise, Slack can also be used largely asynchronously to drop a message in a channel and not assume that someone has seen it until the next day if their work schedule is very different, or they're on vacation, or they live on the other side of the world. So the same tool can be applied to support a very different kind of work. In some quarters, there's a push to use such tools to reinvigorate a more traditional workspace outside of a physical office. So if you have a handful of people working in home offices scattered across the country, new tools may support and even enforce synchronized collaborative work in a way that existing tools do not, whether by using video chat front and center or establishing a paradigm of seeing and responding to messages in a timely manner, something like a text message when compared to an email, which, while not fundamentally different in the user experience if you have push notifications turned on your phone for your email, still supports an underlying difference in custom and usage. So if some new software tool supports faster, more synchronous communication between teammates, this will seem to some like a definite positive, and it will be to some a definite positive. But it still maintains the assumption of the benefit of collaborative work in that environment. And so by adopting it, an organization will effectively have answered the question, what kind of work do we perform, without necessarily even having asked the question. This is why software solutions cannot be treated as answers in and of themselves. A problem must be properly understood and properly posed, and answered at the human level before a software system can attempt to plug any holes in the organization.